Welcome to Choosing Leadership, a podcast for leaders who refuse to play small. I am Sumit Gupta, founder of Tengen Partners. I am here because I see too many brilliant leaders trapped in daily firefights. Too many companies hitting walls that they do not need to hit. Too many people waiting for weekends instead of waking up every day excited to go to work. And very frankly, that is unacceptable to me. At Tengen Partners, we are an unapologetic call to excellence. This podcast is not about giving you more content. It is about shifting the context under which you operate. Because leadership is not a position, leadership is a choice. In each episode, I will bring you conversations with leaders who have made these choices, the uncomfortable ones, the courageous ones, and the ones that changed everything for them and their companies. And with that, keep listening and let's get started. Hi, Gerrit. Welcome to the Choosing Leadership podcast.
Hello, good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you here. You are the founder and co-CEO of Ambits, right? But you have a very interesting background as an academia. So for our listeners, can you share a bit of your backstory and especially the moment maybe you decided or you thought, no, academia is not for me, or now I have to do something else, right? What was that transitionary phase or moment that led you to where you are today?
All right. You're not the first one who asks that question because I can imagine that it's quite intriguing to see that somebody switches from one world to another world because academia is quite a different world than the business world. After my studies in business administration, I did a PhD at the same university. It was Ghent University in Belgium. And then after my PhD, which took 4 years, then I moved to another university in Belgium, the Catholic University of Leuven, but the French-speaking campus. In Belgium, we have both languages. And there I became professor. I was the youngest professor at that time at the university. I was only 26 years old. And there I stayed for 11 years. So the whole period in academia was 4 plus 11 was 15 years, which was a wonderful period. I think academia has a lot of advantages, gives you a lot of opportunities to develop research skills, to develop analytical skills, to develop your planning skills, because in the end you have to work on your own. There is no real boss. Okay, you have an academic supervisor, but in the day-to-day life, you're on your own, you're managing your time yourself, which is nice, but sometimes also a bit tricky. So you learn to organize yourself. For me, maybe the biggest advantage of that whole period was that I was able to travel a lot for international research projects, for conferences. So I've seen a lot of countries, a lot of different places in the world, and that was something I really enjoyed. And if there is one thing that I miss now, is the more the international dimension. So that is very nice. I did a lot of different things at university. Of course, the traditional teaching and research part of the job, which is the basic teaching, I loved a lot. So I really like to be in front of a group of young people, learning them new things. I think something that I did quite well because my evaluations were always very good. So I liked that. The research part was for me a bit like the obligatory part. I had to do that because you also have to publish research and to end up in the rankings somewhere. But that was okay for me. But after a while, it became a bit boring and a bit routine because you take a research domain as possible. And then in that domain, you try to excel and try to become one of the leading researchers. My domain was like that. But after a while, you're very narrowed down and I missed a little bit the challenge there. So publishing more and doing more of the same thing for me was not the most challenging, and intellectually spoken, not the most challenging part. And then the third part, and that was maybe a bit atypical, but I also took up a management role at the university in the last 3 years of that period. That was on a voluntary basis. Nobody forced me to do that. It was my own choice. Maybe because I was a little bit bored in the research part, that I was looking for something new. And then suddenly the opportunity came to become the vice dean of the faculty of management. And for me, it was like, oh, wow, something new, managing things. And it was the first time that I really took up a management position. Maybe at that time, I did that a bit in a naive way because I had no experience in management, a lot in the practical part of management. And I jumped into that role. I was elected because it's with elections that it works. So I was elected. Everybody was supporting it, was go. And then I was like, wow, we're going to do a lot of things and we're going to change a lot of things here. So I decided, not only myself, but I was a bit the lead in a big change project. So we changed actually the two main programs that we had in our faculty as well, which was more management science and business engineering, two programs. The world was changing. We were like, yeah, we have to update the content of the courses, and the way we teach is still the very 1980s. So maybe we have to also update the pedagogical way of doing things. And then in theory, everybody was in favor of that change because everyone was like, yeah, we need to stay relevant and we have to update that for our students. But then, of course, you come to the practical side of changing things in a world that is like, let's say, quite conservative. Academia is a very conservative world where change is not really the thing they want. So everybody was in favor of changing things as long as we didn't touch their courses and their domains and their things. That was tough. And I think I started in a very naive way and I've hit several walls there. Long story short, in the end, we managed it. After 3 years, we changed a lot of things and with a lot of positive impact. But it was also the period that I discovered that the academia was not really my world. It was a bit too conservative. It was a bit too isolated from the rest of the world. It's a bit ivory tower feeling that you have. The governance and the way things are managed is also, let's say, a bit political sometimes. No, not sometimes. It is quite political. It's not a secret. So all in all, at some point I decided that, okay, this is not really the world where I get the most energy from. And then the big change that I had to manage was implemented. And it was like, okay, this is the perfect moment to wrap up the thing and to leave. But okay, yeah, you leave and then you jump into a new adventure in a new world that I was not used to because I had never worked in the real business life. I did some consultancy work while I was at the university, but being a consultant or being a manager, that's quite a different role. But it was by accident, I came into contact with the founder of a startup company where they were looking for somebody to manage the relationship with the universities because they had to hire young IT graduates and also somebody with a bit of commercial feeling. And without overthinking, I said, okay, let's try. And 1 week later, I was there. So I went from the bureaucracy at the university in 1 week to the startup chaos and let's do and let's go. And that was it.
How was those early years before you started Ambits, especially if you move out from like such a long career? It is very easy sometimes to doubt yourself, judge yourself, right? Is it the right decision or am I really meant for this? Or even judge other people, right? Because you see some people working in a very different way than academia. How was those initial like period where you said, okay, this is like, I will stay here? What was that initial period? Yeah.
Regarding myself, I have never doubted. For me, it was like coming home. It felt as of day one as the right decision. I also come from a family with some entrepreneurs, and it was like I had to make a long detour to finally end up where I should be. So for me, personally, I've never doubted. I was very happy. I've never missed academia. No regrets, of course, about all the things that I did there. About, how to get used to people in the real business world. Yeah, that's actually a good question. What I did maybe in the beginning was, it was a bit of a change for me to adapt myself to the way a company is run, a way things are managed, because I was not used to that. I was also very used to work on my own. Academia is very lonely. You're on your island, you do your thing, and that's the most important thing. And then suddenly I come in a startup company with a team of 7, 8 people. But then I was not on my own anymore. And it was not me, myself, and I. It was like, okay, we are a team and we have to do it as a team. And that was for me, I think, the most challenging part, to switch from a very individualistic way of working where I had a one-on-one impact on my own success simply because, okay, when I did something like this, you saw the outcome. And then I ended up in a world where I was only part of the whole story of the puzzle. And that was,
Yeah.
I have to share things, communicate what I'm doing, not only just doing it, but make sure that the rest of the team knows what I'm doing. Basic things that, of course, people who start their career in a corporate environment, they know that. I've learned that with 15 years of DA, but the switch from very individualistic to collective, that was challenging. And at some points, I was also a bit annoyed by the fact that the other ones always wanted to know what I was doing, which is, of course, from their point of view, very normal. But in the first months, let's say that was for me like, why do I have to explain all that? Let me do my job and I will do it.
Yeah. Simply asking for help or sharing with a team sometimes can be challenging, as you mentioned, right? But now you're 9 years since you left. What lessons have business taught you or entrepreneurship taught you that maybe academia or university could not?
Oh, yeah. I think overall, I realize now how easy and comfortable my life was in academia. Although at that time, of
Yeah.
course, if you would have asked me that question, I would also say it's tough and it's challenging and we have to work a lot. And in the end, if you compare it with running a company, now I'm 6 years running my own company, where in the end, bottom line, it's your own money. Yeah, you have to work for your money. At university, I had a fixed salary. It wasn't very high because it's public sector in Belgium, so it's not private. But in the end, you're quite well paid. You manage your own time. For me, honestly, my life at that time was easy peasy. Yeah, was wow. That is so. I was one thing that I learned now is that if you're really in the heart of running a company, you're the end responsible one. You're the final responsible person for the things that are happening here, and also for the bottom line, the P&L, the money that comes in or not does not come in.
Yeah.
It's a completely different world, but it's normal that if you're in one of the two worlds, you don't know it about the other. That is one thing. The second thing that I've learned is that I think I'm an entrepreneur more than I was a professor. I like to take some risks from time to time. I like to jump into new things without knowing what is going to happen. That are parts of my own personality that I did not give enough attention at the university, or that could not flourish at the university, because there everything was quite conservative. And in the end, you were not really stimulated to take risks. On the contrary, you were just stimulated to become better and better in the same thing. Yeah, that was probably the reason why I felt at some point that it was not the right place, because some parts of myself could not flourish there.
Yeah.
And that is more the entrepreneurial part, the risk-taking part.
Yeah.
And in the end, also the interaction with other people, because although I said that the switch was difficult from individualistic to collective, but in the end, I missed the people part at academia, because academia is very individualistic. So you're not really stimulated to collaborate, although you can do it, but it's always on your own initiative. I missed that. I can remember that in the early days at university, I went there at 8:30 in the morning. I was in my office, single office with my desk, and I was there until 5:30 in the evening, and I didn't see anyone. You imagine that. And so it was like I was sitting there, home working was not so at that time. Now, now I realize that I was also missing the interaction, the social part, the people part. And that was also another part of myself that, at that time could not really.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, right? It's not easy, right? Entrepreneurship, you are, as you said, responsible for whatever happens. And I think just after you started, COVID happened, right? I would ask you a question, right? It's not easy. It's very different from what you did earlier. What has kept you to continue doing this year after year, especially during a crisis like COVID? But for businessmen, it's never COVID. There's always something. You don't have to wait for COVID, right? So what has kept you going year after year, even with more challenges, more responsibility, maybe more anxiety, stress?
At that point, the timing was a bit strange, but it was what it was. I left the previous company, was where I worked for 3 years. That decision was taken. I took that decision, I think, end of 2019. Nobody talked about COVID at that time. And the decision was taken. I knew I was going to launch Ambits, and I knew that was the way that I was going. But then suddenly, end of February 2020, okay, when I really did my last day, I think it was the last week of February, I had the first articles in the newspaper about COVID, but we were all like, okay, it will never really become something big. So I just jumped into it. And then step by step, of course, in March, of course, to discover that, the world is really standing still. There was no plan B. There was only plan A, and plan A was we launch Ambits. Full stop. We do it. And then we do it online, whatever you want. And then we try to find as quickly as possible our first customers, our first mentors. And honestly, I think it was actually not that difficult because suddenly everyone was available. You did not have to drive to meet up with people. I remember that I did my market analysis interviews to all online. Suddenly I could talk to 6-7 people in one day. For me, it felt really, this is super efficient. So it was for me actually a gift, a full focus on that because for the rest in your private and social life, there was not a lot of other things to do. So it was actually like, wow, it was a gift maybe to launch a company in that period. And I never realized, or I've never been very stressed about that. For me, the plan was there. We had to execute. And okay, the context was maybe a bit different.
Yeah. What I love about entrepreneurship or business is that the vision, right? That's the reason that we're starting an organization or the future that we want to create creates so much motivation that you don't see the pain of it, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So with the Ambits, you're building a human-centric, like mentoring and leadership. You have built a community of mentors. Can you share a bit more about Ambits, right? How far have you come and what is it that you want to create in the world out there through Ambits in the future?
Actually, it's very nice that you go back to that initial period because I agree. That your conviction, your passion, the reason why you're doing that is so strong that you actually don't see the hurdles. You see them, but you don't consider them as real hurdles. And actually, when I look back, I have never felt very stressed about the impact of COVID on the launch of a company. It was like, I don't know, we just go for it. Why I've started it and what is still my conviction nowadays is that good leaders have a huge impact on the world. And that's just very fluffy and high level what I say. But if you work on leadership, if you can help people to become better leaders, it has an impact on their day-to-day life, their team, their company, of course, the ecosystem in which they operate. But it has a much bigger impact than that. If you have a positive impact on your team, those team members also have a positive impact on your customers in their private lives. You also shine in your private life or in your other ecosystems in which you work. So leadership is such a huge leverage for wealth and for happiness. And that is the reason why I decided already in 2019, I have to do something about that. And ideally with a new way of working on leadership, because you have training and you have coaching, which are very, let's say, common and evergreen solutions. I felt that something was missing in the market there. I'm personally a very strong believer of the power of mentoring. I noticed at that time that there was not really a mentoring company. Okay, some people offer their service as a solo mentor, but at that time there were no companies, at least not in Belgium and this part of Europe. So I was like, I see an opportunity. I see a need to work on leadership. I see what good leaders, but also bad leaders can do or not do in their day-to-day life. I see existing solutions that are okay-ish, but maybe not always very impactful. And that was the opportunity I saw. Okay, then we're going to launch a mentoring company. We're going to work on leadership, but we're going to do it in a different way. We're going to use the experience of leaders or in the field, people with a lot of miles on experience. Okay, people who are willing to share that experience. And that was the start. That was the conviction. That was the passion and the vision. And that is still the case. That has never changed. And so we built the whole company around that, which means we've built a mentor community. And that's an ongoing process. We keep on adding new mentors from time to time. We've built a process. How can we deliver those mentoring services? It's more than just here is a mentor and now you can do it. No, we've set up a methodology, a process so that it can be done in a disciplined, structured way so that it has also impact. In other words, we've tried to build a company with good mentors and a good process, and the combination will lead to impact. That is what we have built from day one. But it's an ongoing project. So you learn step by step what is a good mentor. You have in the beginning of the story, you have a view on that. What is a good mentor? You start with people, of course, that you know from your inner circle. But then step by step, you discover, okay, maybe there are other things that are also important in a good mentor. Some people leave, other people join. So step by step, you learn to select the right people, hopefully the right people. And then you build also a process so that you can offer this in a scalable way. It's not like we customize everything. We do a lot of customization, but in the end, the basic process is the same. So you build that so that the customer also knows that, once the journey starts, it's going to have an impact. And that is a continuous process. Even after 6.5 years, we're still fine-tuning and tweaking the process. And we're talking more about digital experience. AI is included in all the process. And that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. So again, building up on that conviction, right, that you started and you still have that conviction about leadership and the impact it can have. Where do you see yourself playing a role, right? Even if you detach yourself from the current operations of Ambits as a person, as a leader, how do you want to see leadership, right? And I don't just mean the business world, because leadership is also something which happens outside of the business world. It happens in families, it happens in societies, it happens in politics. And then business obviously is a big factor in that, right? How do you want to change the world or change the leaders or shape the culture of leaders? Because you were here, because you had this time and you have taken such a bold step already in your career, which is quite different, right? From somebody who has 3 companies behind them and they say, I want to start a 4th mentoring company. Compared to you, I think that conviction has a much deeper arc into your soul or into your past, right? There's a much deeper. What would be a vision for that conviction that you have?
I think now that you're asking the question, at first I was thinking, wow, what a difficult question. That in the end, it's not that difficult. I think for me, if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself. Because having an impact on the world, small or large, whatever, it always starts with yourself. It starts in how you look at things, how you behave, how you interact with people, the impact you can create in your little ecosystem, in your little life, because in the end, it's not that big, and that starts with yourself, how you look at the world, how you look at yourself, how you know yourself. Good leaders know themselves very well, their good points, their strengths, but also their blind spots. For me, that's crucial. If you know what your strengths are, and if you can develop those strengths further and make them even stronger, I think automatically you will create impact and you will inspire other people. But also being aware of the less nice things about yourself and the blind spots you have. That's also important, and not being blind and stubborn, and keep on working on yourself. Each step that I take for myself, in working on myself, in becoming a better person, in knowing myself, in discovering other layers of my own personality, of who I am, is a step in the right direction, I think. And that's the only way for me to have a positive impact on the company, people working for us, our clients, but also, society in general.
Yeah. And coming back to change starts with oneself, right? What does the change that you want to create in the world requiring you to change from you as a person, as a leader, as let's say the operations grow, the scale grows, the impact grows of your work? What is that change that you are facing in the coming months or years?
Yeah. I think if I look back to the 6 previous years, a big change I think I've made myself is not being too convinced about how important you are in the whole story. Of course, a company needs a strong founder and a face and somebody with a clear vision and somebody who inspires and who can enthusiasm everyone. And of course, but in the end, that's not the only thing that counts. And I think in the beginning of my entrepreneurial adventure, I was very convinced that I was really the key central person in all this. And suddenly, I also realized that it's not only about me, it's about attracting the right people, working with the right people around you, working on yourself, not always being convinced that you are always Mr. Right. So, in other words, working on your own ego is important because otherwise you block the progress and the future of the company. So that is, I think, was for me an important thing, allowing other people to give their opinion about your company, allowing other people to take responsibilities in your company. It seems all very obvious. Okay, that's normal that you do that. But I think a lot of founders will recognize that it's not so easy and not so evident. So if you really allow that, I think you can go very far. So for me, that was really like, okay, how can I be the face of the company and the voice of the company without being the bottleneck at the same time, and allowing other people, talented people, to also build the company and also do their part of the growth of the company. Yeah. And I think that's a
Yeah.
dilemma that a lot of founders probably recognize.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, right? That's something extraordinary for somebody who can share it publicly. What I would want to ask you next is that what you mentioned, right? Not to think yourself as too important, right? First of all, what is it that you had to let go of, or maybe even still you have to let go of to bring other people in? And I think second thing, I think for me as a business leader, I have found freedom even in terms of making bold decisions or making bold initiatives when I really don't want the credit, or I'm not trying to impress somebody or my team, sometimes even my team. I'm open to failure. I'm open to somebody
Yeah.
saying something about me, right? So,
Yeah.
first is what have you let go of, or you have to let go of? And the second is on the other side, right? What have you seen? What maybe has there been a bold move? Has there been a step which is quite detached from your history?
I think the first thing I can answer on that question is more like, and again, I think it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs will recognize. When you start a company, it's very often because you want to prove something to somebody. Yeah. It sounds a bit psychological what I'm saying here, but I think it's very important. For me, it was as well the case, without going too much into detail. But in the end, you start always a company inspired by a kind of frustration. I want to show that I can do it better, put it in simple terms. And indirectly, you try to prove something to somebody. Maybe people who are not in your life anymore, or people from the past, or whatever. But I think a lot of people, maybe in general, but definitely a lot of entrepreneurs, that is a bit the conviction that they have in the beginning, I think, is I know it better, I can do this better, and I'm going to show person X or Y that I can do it better than he or she, simplistically said. And that was the case for me as well. And the shift starts the moment you let go that idea that you have to prove something to somebody. Because proving things creates a lot of stress, because you're not only focused on running the company, but there is an extra layer. I have to prove something, and what would that other person, although that person is maybe dead, but whatever, the proving thing creates an additional stress. And that is not useful. It doesn't create any value.
Yeah.
So for me, a big shift, and it's related to what I said previously about the ego. Proving something is also very interconnected with your ego, of course.
Okay.
So the moment you let go the idea that you have to prove something to somebody, then you create freedom. For me, that's at least how I experienced it. That is the moment that I say, wow, when I do it without proving something to somebody, I can flourish. And
Yeah.
I still remember a bit the period where I made that shift.
Yeah. And what has come out of it, right? So one thing is you get more involvement, right? You allow people in, you
Yeah.
create more of a team, right? But
Yeah.
For me, what I've seen is, first of all, with that freedom, uh, there comes a lot of, I don't literally have word for it, but crazy or bold moves which I can take because I'm not concerned now about appearances. What has that led you to do, which others might call luck or chance? That you are free, so you said something because it was there in your mind, and you were not worried about process or any. It led to an outcome. It led to a result.
Yeah, I think what you say is correct. It allows you to take bold moves without being too concerned about what other people will say. And for me, I think in the whole Ambits story, probably the first bold move I had to make, or I made myself, is actually the split from my first co-founder, which was approximately 3 years after the launch, 2023. Yeah, that was turmoil because we did not start collaborating as co-founders with the intention that, okay, this is going to end in 3 years. So you have to really shift your whole view and mindset. That was bold. Yeah. I think was necessary for the next steps, or to be able to take the next steps, which does not mean that I regret the collaboration. On the contrary, it was a very fruitful collaboration, but it was a collaboration that was not sustainable. So for me, the point that I realized, okay, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. Put your ego aside. What is best for the company? Then you can take bold steps and say, okay, it's not an easy decision. It's an emotional decision. There is a lot of human impact, but we're going to do it. Probably that is the point. And time on the timeline, it was all a bit in the same period where you make all these shifts.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that example. Almost something which every founder, like who has a co-founder, maybe faces. And many times it can be years, right? That you stay in that state. You're avoiding a conversation. Right. So, yeah. Another thing which I've seen entrepreneurs deal with is having a dream, but also having a reason of not being worthy of that dream. And that could be about your personality or a trait or a skill or culture of the organization. So, is there a dream that you have downgraded or you're not really fully going after because you believe that you are not for that, or either the person or the company is different? Yeah.
It's the very first time that somebody asked that question. It's a very good question, actually. I'm going to keep it in mind, whatever, for the future, because it's a very good question. Top of mind, I would not say that I'm downgrading dreams. Maybe I'm dreaming in a more realistic way than 5, 6 years ago. Maybe but that has nothing to do with me. No, well, maybe it has to do, because when I said about the ego, and in the first years, I was very convinced that we had to go internationally as quickly as possible. For me, that was like the big leverage for the growth. And we were still struggling a bit to keep the business running in Belgium. But on top of that, we were going into other countries and we're going to conquer the world. That was a big dream for me. That was like, success means I want to be present in multiple countries, and Ambits should be an international brand. That was, again, maybe a bit too ego driven and a bit like, I'm going to prove the world that I can have an international company in 3 years from now, which was completely unrealistic, and which made us making or taking wrong decisions as well. And I didn't allow other people to stop me. I didn't allow other people to criticize that and say, wow, is that the right thing to do now? I was like, no, we have to go internationally as quickly as possible. I still have a bit that dream, but now I dream in a more realistic way. It's not like I don't think that I deserve that dream. I deserve the dream to have an international company. But I have learned that in order to get there, you really have to take certain steps first and make sure the business is solid and sustainable before you try to scale. Especially, we're not in a tech business, we're in a human, people-driven business. It's not that easy to scale it immediately in other countries. But by making the dream realistic, the dream feels better. And it's not an ego-driven dream, it's a business-related dream. And that was something when you talk about dreaming and downgrading dreams, but I think for me, it was positive to downplay a bit the dream Because otherwise you go from one deception and disappointment to the other. Because if your dream is absolutely not realistic and you're not on the right path to achieve it, it's disappointment. You'll always be disappointed.
Yeah. See, I would spar with you a little bit on this, right? I love that what you said, right? That if you're trying to prove something and then that creates a dream or a vision, that's a trap, right? It will not
Yeah,
allow you to be peaceful. Either
correct.
phase, right? Whether you are moving forward or not, it will not allow you to be peaceful because even if you are achieving success, let's say you're expanding internationally, that aspiring to prove it to somebody or to even to yourself creates a lot of anxiety of not losing it on the other side of it, right? Which is no fun either, right? Now, but the moment you can say, I'm not attached by that ego or that proving, I have also seen that dreams get more unrealistic or more bold because it's not hinged onto proving something and it's not hinged onto happiness, right? So it's not like I have a dream and if I achieve it, I will be successful. It's more like I am already successful. There's nothing to prove. And now let's go experiment. Let's go and then let's go whatever, right? So, what would be, like, as you said, realistic? You use that word multiple times. What would be something unrealistic if you have the permission to go after something unrealistic and it would still be purpose led? It was still coming from your heart or not just for the sake of numbers. What would that unrealistic dream would be for you?
And it can be unrealistic. That's the condition.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, then it's being the number one in the world, like when it comes to mentoring, and that mentoring from Ambits is the standard for mentoring worldwide. And even while I'm saying it, I feel uncomfortable. Yeah, like world dominance, all mentoring in the world goes through Ambits because we are the authority when it comes to mentoring. Maybe that's, yeah, it's
Yeah.
maybe a bold dream. And then
Yeah.
another one would be to say, yeah, okay, in theory, every leader, every entrepreneur needs a mentor at some point in his or her life. We're absolutely very far from that if you look at how much percent of the market that we have. But yeah, another bold dream could be like, is that everyone, every entrepreneur, every leader, and that is a huge number, of course, has one day a mentor
Yeah.
to really feel the power and the value of a mentor. So for me, mentoring should be, and I think that is quite even maybe a bit more realistic to say, is that it should be a minimum standard for every leader and entrepreneur, is that they have this in their backpack at some point or in their network, and that they can really benefit from it, because the steps you can take in your career, in your personal developments are so huge thanks to a mentor. So it's a pity if you don't have it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you also mentioned it's a bit uncomfortable to speak it out loud, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because many times it's because you hold that responsibility, right? The moment you speak it, the moment you put it into words, you have that responsibility of that impact of that good that you create in the world, and like you don't get to shy away from it if you speak it out boldly and openly, right? What will that take from you, right? Like everybody having a mentor, right? And Ambits being known as, let's say, the catalyst for doing that, and again doing it in a purpose led way, right? I still don't want to confuse it with ego and like all of that. If you want to do it with your lessons so far, right, including that letting go, including that I want it to be inclusive, I want to give space for others, what will that take from you that maybe makes you very so uncomfortable that you don't even go there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no idea. Of course, it's a mission that you can never accomplish on your own. So that's
Yeah.
first thing in line with what we said before. You have to have the right people around you to get there. So maybe that's maybe a bit my, I don't know, worry or reality check, is that my question is that pops up immediately in my head is, who is going to help with that? Who is going to do this together with me? Maybe that's the reason why it feels sometimes a bit uncomfortable. And it's also something I think that doesn't stop once I stop.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a movement. It's a mindset. It's not something that is related to my person or my company. It's something that is much broader and bigger than that. And therefore, maybe not always easy to grasp and say, okay, yeah, what has been my impact directly and what has been the impact that I have created indirectly. So, and maybe I'm a bit too realistic in my mind that I say, okay, if I don't see the indirect impact, I feel uncomfortable maybe. But nevertheless, I'm convinced that if you do the things that you can do in your life, in your span of control, with all the means you have, that the impact will always be much bigger than you think it has initially or directly.
Yeah.
So that is a conviction that, makes me again more relaxed and say, okay, it's not only about the number of countries or the number of clients or the number of mentors, whatever. It's broader than that. It's a movement.
Absolutely. So I appreciate you being comfortable sharing about the discomfort, right? Because it's like the moment you dream bigger, all of those discomforts, we can also call them fears or anxieties, will come up. And this is for any human being, not just for like you, but this is true for almost any human being that like we tend to, we were talking about change earlier, but nobody wants change as human beings. Change makes, if we have any insecurity, if we have a trauma, change will bring it up. So it's normal. So to have a dream and to feel uncomfortable, like that's, if you don't feel uncomfortable, I would say you're playing too safe. At least that's what I've learned from my experience. Yeah. But just moving on to just a bit more on the personal side of you, right? What is it, something about you that you do, that you indulge in, work or not, that you would say is a very meaningful part of who you are? At the same time, the people that you work with or the people that you're friends with might not know about it.
I don't know whether people know that, or I think most people in my inner circle, private and business wise, they know that. I'm connecting the dots. In other words, my strength is that I connect ideas and people in two ways. Thanks to the work that we do, we work for many different companies. I have the luxury to go and see leaders in many different companies on a weekly basis. I go from big corporates to small SMEs and everything in between, everything. And that gives me a lot of inspiration. I see a lot of things and I quickly see patterns and things that come back in every story I hear. And what I really enjoy doing is writing about these patterns and analyzing that. And okay, what are typical leadership struggles in that type of company or family owned businesses? What do we typically see there? And where does that come from? And maybe that's also with my academic background. I really like to analyze things. But that analyzing things also allows me to inspire people because I have the luxury that I see all these different companies and cases but if you work in one single company, it's very hard to have that. So by having that background and that all those analytical insights, I can inspire a lot of people through LinkedIn, but also through simple advice or in a client meeting. You can easily see, okay, I recognize what you have here as a struggle and okay, let me give you that advice because I know from many other cases that this or that could work. That is one thing I really love. And I feel that when I come out of a meeting or a discussion or a conversation, and where I've been able to do that, inspire people thanks to all those connecting the dots in my head, I'm the happiest man in the world. That's one thing I think is a strength. And the second strength is I love to connect people. Since I left academia, I've built a nice network, I can say. I'm strongly convinced that in business life, it's not only about what you are able to do, but also who you know, and your network, the people you know, the people that can help you, or you can help them, or vice versa. That can make a huge difference in business life. I think I can give you many examples of that, but I also like to help other people with my network. When I hear people saying something, I immediately connect that to other stories I've heard and say, maybe it's interesting. You talk to him or her, or I can bring you together. That's another way of connecting dots, not the content part or the analytical part, but more the human part. And it's so nice to see that after a while, people say, oh yeah, but I remember that you recommended me to talk to him or her. And now we're doing this or that together, whatever. And even if there is no outcome, I don't mind. But in the end, that I think are my two biggest strengths that help us as a company also business-wise.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, right? It's those little things that sometimes we do almost naturally, that is which makes you. And to see the results of that, sometimes it's like ripples is, like, as you said, it's very meaningful and the happiest person in the world, right? So thank you. Thank you for this wonderful conversation. For our listeners, what is the best way for them to reach out to you or to find out more about you and Ambits?
Oh, that's very easy. We have, of course, a website, ambits.eu, where you find everything we do, all the mentors, and where you can also easily reach out. There's a nice and convenient contact form. You can connect on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be influencer when it comes to leadership. So, as I said, I love to share things. So LinkedIn is for me the platform to do that. So if people start following me on LinkedIn, they can discover step by step all the things that I was talking about and all the things I'm sharing with the world. Yeah, that is, I think, the best way to reach out. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Gerrit, once again for coming on the show and having this wonderful conversation. As we wrap this up, I would like to wish you all the best for all the changes, all the growth, all the excitement, and the discomfort that lies ahead.
Thank you, Sumit, for your questions. They were very good questions, and I'm going to write them down because I really love your questions and they really triggered something. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's it for this episode of Choosing Leadership. Here is what I want you to know: you are capable of so much more than you currently think that you are. And that is not because I have all the answers. That is because I have lived it. I have gone from hiding behind a comfortable tech career to building companies, coaching CEOs, and standing for impossible dreams like taking India's volleyball team to the Olympics. So if this episode hits you, if it resonated with you, share it. Tag someone who needs to hear this. Tag someone who is currently playing smaller than you know that they are capable of. And if you are a leader ready to play the biggest game of your life, if you are ready to make those 100 million jumps, then reach out and let's talk about being a guest on this show. If you want to go deeper, visit tangentpartners.com or find me on LinkedIn. Once again, remember, mediocrity is a choice, and so is excellence. I'm your host, Sumit Gupta, and until the next time, keep listening, keep choosing leadership.